afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining the Indonesia Education Forum's roundtable. This is the 9th roundtable that we are organized. Just to give you a little background, the Education Forum was an initiative of the Indonesia Economic Forum, which has been around for the last 7 years. And last year, the founders of the Economic Forum working together with Pa Ilham, Nalin Singh, with Pa Gogot, Pa Ananto, who's also from the ministry at that time. And we decided that we must have a separate forum to discuss matters that are important to education. So we had a very large education forum. I think about 600 people attended it during the Habibi Festival last year. And we followed that up with a series of monthly roundtables, which is meant for about 20 to 25 people to participate. At the roundtables, the discussion is limited to a group of people, but the report that comes out of the roundtable is widely circulated. So that goes to about, I think, 15 or 20,000 people across several countries who are interested in issues that are discussed by the Education Forum. So we have readers who come in from China to Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, etc. People who have some interest in education here. But we restrict the roundtable discussion to a smaller group so that we can have a meaningful discussion and come up with the key points that need to be brought out. This Education Forum is actually 1 month away from the main Indonesia Economic Forum, which is coming up in the 24th of November for 4 days. On day 3, which is 26th, is a special day for the Education Forum, as well as some of the topics that are being done there are with several ministry and some of the other participants that are with us. And that would be open to a much larger audience. Then, of course, we are looking at, I think, 600 to 1,000 participants during that event. Of course, the same strategy would apply. Then the reports that are generated from that would go out to the mass media. So this is the mechanism of the roundtable, and this is the 9th roundtable today. We are very pleased to have a very qualified and I would say competent group of speakers today to address the topic of opportunities for investing in education in Indonesia. And what that we want to do with today's discussion is to come up with a paper which would be like a thought, a collection of thoughts and ideas and probably even recommendations of things that we should pursue, which we will take up in 4 weeks from now during the Economic Forum. And the contributions that will come from you all today will help us to design what exactly we take to a very mass public forum in end of November. Pa Amish, who is at Bapenas, is a very senior diplomat, a very senior bureaucrat who has been instrumental in many initiatives that are taking place in his portfolio, which is education and religion. We're very happy to have you here, Pa Amish. Welcome to the Education Forum, and we hope that you could be one of our regular, every 2 or 3 months, if you could come and say a few words and share some insight, it would be fantastic. We also have several director generals from Ministry of Education who do the same thing now. We have about 3 or 4 of the dirigents who come every 2 or 3 months, so it gives us a little bit of a feel for what is going on between policy and execution. We also have Jaspal. Jaspal Sidhu is the founder of CIS group of schools as well as Inspirasi schools, which he has set up recently. And Jaspal will be sharing with us some of his thoughts on K-12 education opportunities in Indonesia. And why I think that is important is because of what Jaspal himself has done. Jaspal has come up with a methodology that has earned him a lot of recognition internationally. We will talk a little bit about that too later on. But that international recognition is actually kudos to the kind of work that needs to be done in a country like this. In a country with the challenges of logistics, geographical spread, etc. What kind of models will work in such countries? You cannot plug and play, copy paste the models from anywhere else. You need to find something that works here, fits here, and is suitable to the culture of Indonesia. And Jaspal, having lived in Indonesia for so many years, knows exactly how to do that. So it's a fantastic session that we'll have today. Of course, hopefully this will lead into something we would take up in a much bigger way in November. We also have Oliver. In fact, Oliver Anderson has been also in Indonesia for many years, and you could always say that you are localized, Oliver. So Oliver set up Ask Consulting, which specializes in higher education, and of course across the board, many projects in education are actually being handled by Oliver to come into Indonesia. So he's looking at that aspect very closely, but he's also a speaker in the circuit nowadays for talking about higher education and what are the opportunities there. And I think that's a separate aspect, an opportunity that we need to look at and understand a little better. So we'll have Oliver ending today's discussion with that. And I have here Pak Gogot, who's on our advisory board. Pak Gogot, welcome, Pak. Pak Gogot is...
welcome. Thank you, Pak.
Thank you, Pak Gogot. Pak Gogot actually has a wealth of experience in many of the digital initiatives of the government, of the ministry, and he's still involved in that part of the, I think one of the most important aspects of education with this pandemic that's going on now. The challenges are all being addressed in many ways, if not all, by factors that are very digital in nature, whether it is hardware, it's software, whether it is curriculum, whether it's way of teaching and training, or is upgrading the skills of the teachers, etc. The digital part of it has suddenly become very important, and Pak Gogot is in the middle of that. Pak Gogot would be towards the end giving us an update of what's been going on in the last 1 month. That's Pak Gogot always gives us a monthly update. Pak Shoaib gives us a roundup of what's happening in context of education with the rest of the economy, because Pak Shoaib specializes a lot on cross-sectoral macroeconomics as well as sectoral economics. He's quite well known for his views on that. I would actually start with what we usually end with. Usually we end with food for thought, which is done by my colleague Nalin Singh. Nalin is a startup guru who's been involved in a lot of training and education for startups. And this is basically the next step. After you finish K-12, you finish university, higher education, and then you start working or you start a business of your own. This is the part which kicks in is entrepreneurship education. And Nalin is one of the startup gurus in the region. He's a publisher. He's authored a book called Get Funded, which is on the Amazon bestseller list. Internationally, he's won many awards there. And Nalin is now in Indonesia working on an education project that we are setting up along with Pak Ilham and working with the ministry. So usually Nalin ends the day with a food for thought on a topic. But today I asked Nalin to start with the food for thought because I thought we needed a little bit of a starting point. I mean, where are we actually today versus where we want to go and how we're going to get there. So a kind of a simple benchmark of some data or information that will help us open our eyes and then put the discussion by Pa Amish, Pa Jaspal and Pa Oliver into perspective. And Nalin, why don't you get started with that? You'll have about 5 to 10 minutes to go over a starting point, which is food for thought for us. Over to you, Nalin.
So Sachin, you can see my screen?
Yes, perfectly.
Good evening, everybody. It never ceases to surprise me whenever I come to the Education Forum. For the kind of student I was, if my teachers actually saw me speaking at an education forum, they would have had a heart attack. Now, I'm not yet comfortable with my Bahasa, so I'm speaking in English. So rather than you laugh at my Bahasa, you can laugh at the translation at the bottom of the screen, courtesy Microsoft. It's supposed to be 70-80% accurate. You can judge for yourself. I'm going to talk about the investment scene in education, or rather edutech. So I'm not speaking of education in general. I'm just talking of edutech. All the slides I'm presenting are from the World Bank report on Indonesia released 2 months ago. Very fresh report, just 2 months old. So if you look at the global, that is just to set the table for the discussion, right? The global investment in edutech, it's skyrocketed. Everybody knows. But what is the most interesting part of this slide, if you look at the 2 major financial crises in the year 2000 and the year 2008-9 had the maximum investment in edutech, just like it is happening now during COVID. Financial crises make people rush to invest in education for some reason. Data proves that. As far as spending and learning outcomes are concerned, if you take the reading scores on PISA and take public expenditure per student, you can see where we rank. And that is one of the challenges for all of us to overcome, because people cannot wait for us to find a solution over decades. They need an answer in years. Similarly, that previous graph gets reflected in digitization and labor productivity. These are all for Indonesia by the World Bank. And that is one of the reasons there is so much focus on all of it over here. But let's look a little deeper. The private Indonesian edtech sector over the last 6 years has been booming. In fact, 2019-20 data has not yet come, but the rough data that has come shows that the trend continues. And the trend continues in proportion to the internet penetration ratio. But how big is it? Look at the number of edtech companies that got invested over the last 3-4 years. We are looking at only 23 companies. That's it. That's the game. So between the hype and the reality, this is where it is. Who gets invested? Again, talking edutech, not regular education. B2C consumer companies, corporate education, very little to higher education, and also a very small proportion pre-K-12. No money in that. No money in any physical education. Again, I don't say that, but if you read the Forbes and Time magazine report, they basically say that over the next decade in America and Europe, 50% of the universities will shut down and become ghost towns. We'll see why also. The edtech sector in Indonesia, the landscape is pretty deep, pretty wide, pretty deep, from classroom tools to school administration to student loans, digital interactive content, and of course the usual online courses that we look at, right? Everything is there. If you look at what they offer, of course, right at the bottom of the screen, you can see almost everybody has a learning management software. And then you start going lower and lower and lower. And then you have a few companies in the event market space or the aggregation of educators and things like that. In the middle, you have all the testing people, the counseling people, the learning analytics people. But it is largely an LMS play, which everybody focuses on. What do they teach? One of the complaints against edutech is that all they do is copy what is done in the classroom and give it a sexy makeover digitally. Actually, it's true. It's not a wrong comment. Right now, maybe they'll develop their own content someday, but right now they're basically rehashing what is being taught in different ways. And most of them do multiple topics. And most of them focus on technology, language, science, life skills, and vocational skills. Very little on social sciences, arts, design, craft, things like that. Delivery is largely web browser based. Largely. Few of them have offline, few of them have hybrid. In fact, Orbit Future Academy is the few which has got a hybrid model. It is lopsided. It is Jakarta centric and West Java centric right now. And as you go into the provinces, the edtech market coverage gets lower and lower and lower. But this is not a complaint against edtech. This is just the way the GDP and the economics is right now for almost every other service. Who do they target? So the target is again less of parents and administrators and teachers. Right now, they're still focusing on students. Studies show that's likely to change. And they tend to target older students, thankfully. Only COVID has forced younger students to come onto the bandwagon. But generally, it is grade 10 and above, which is where the target is. Why do they not make money? Only 49% actually pay the full fee. 43% are free. Out of all the edtech companies in Indonesia, 89%, only 89% have revenue, and only 27% of the 89% are profitable. As a percentage to capital employed, profitability is less than 0.5%. I could argue that you could leave your money in a fixed deposit and make more money. Almost all of them engage with the government. In Indonesia, engagement to the government by edtech firms is the highest in Southeast Asia or in ASEAN, even higher than Singapore. That says something about the openness of the Ministry of Education here. But they constantly need to pivot their models. Why do they need to do that? Because they're not making money. They want to increase revenues and they want to acquire customers cheaper. Those are two major reasons that is making them change their business model every single day. Money is coming, but money is coming, only those 20, 30 odd get funded out of a few hundred or thousand. Angel investors and VCs mostly. But yeah, Indonesia has got more grants from ministries for startups than I have seen in almost all ASEAN countries, including India and probably excluding Singapore. So in terms of government intervention with direct grants, it is among the highest that I've seen anywhere in the region. The good news is many of these edtech founders gravitated towards edtech. You could say the same about Sachin and me, right? We've run all kind of companies. At the age of 50, we are now doing edtech. We probably fall in this category. This is the biggest challenge. The average megabits per second for internet connections, whether fixed line or mobile is slightly better than fixed line. This is the challenge. There is no edtech, there is no online without line. So till this pipeline is sorted, the overhype, the halo effect, the disproportionate investment on edtech right now seems like, la la land wishful thinking. The bigger market is there on the other side. But yeah, hope is a great stimulant, especially for investors. So look at the global trends. Education expenditure, this is not edtech, overall education expenditure from $5.9 trillion in 2018 going to go to $8.1 trillion by 2025. The fastest growth, faster than electric vehicles, faster than AI, faster than any other technology. Education is the fastest growing industry in the world, you like it or not. And for that scale, we're talking trillions of dollars growing. We're not talking 1 million becoming 2 million. Where will it grow? Right here where we are sitting. We are sitting on the greatest edtech opportunity of all time, or even education opportunity, because of the youthful population and still the halo effect of a degree. But here's the problem. That's why universities are shutting down, and the trend will continue, and we will be left with ghost towns. Most university rectors don't recognize this. I feel really sorry for them. 1 out of 3 US college graduates work in jobs that do not require a degree. That percentage has doubled in the last 8 years alone. That percentage has gone 3 times in India, where degrees are valued so much. Constant upskilling is the game. We are going to go into the upskilling game, the upskilling cycle. Nobody wants to study physics, chemistry, maths. Only old people like us think people should study that. They can get it off Google. YouTube is the biggest university. Most of the students in schools and colleges know more than the professor and teacher. They just sit there because they are forced to. Ask them in an anonymous poll, they'll tell you. Most of the money that does come to EdTech goes only in seed funding. Round ABC never happens because they don't make money. And all investors know in EdTech, only founders make money. Investors never make money. The reasons for that I can tell you in an offline conversation, more private than a public forum. Where they are putting money, talent, upskilling, STEM, coding, robotics, etc. We may not agree to this. This may not be the way things should be, but this is the way they are. Now for ASEAN and us or EdTech companies, what are the challenges? Money. They don't make money, but they still need money. They do everything online without investment into a building, office, etc. And they want to spend a few hundreds of millions of dollars to get a few $100s of revenue. That's the fact. No EdTech system to support, which includes technology and things like that. Psychological price of entrepreneurship. The fragmentation of the market. Southeast Asia is one word, but it is not one country. Even one country like India, Indonesia have got so many subcultures in them. Resistance from educators among the most fixed-minded people in the world. I'm not saying that, don't hold me responsible. That's a study done again by the World Bank. They actually studied all the university incubator and accelerator managers in the world to see, because they all want to attract growth mindset people, entrepreneurial mindset people. They saw that the growth mindset percentage among the managers and people managing incubators was less than 1/10 of the incubatees. I would place a bet that if you did teachers and educators, you'll probably come up with the same kind of percentage. And of course, internet access. Those are the points I wanted to share as food for thought before we dive into the main session. Thank you, Sachin.
Thank you, Nalin. As you put it in a very good way, we are at the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the opportunity for education here. The good thing about everything being so low and being at the bottom of the pyramid or bottom of the marketplace is that the only way is up. So I think that's what we want to understand, that given the circumstances, given the situation, given the challenges, what is the way up? Because there is definitely a way up, but we need to find out how. And we need to figure out how to navigate through that, which is a combination of many things. It's not just opportunity in the regions or, your relationships, your collaborations, but it's also government policy. It's also, the kind of competition that your sector may have versus other sectors, which might be, attracting more attention, etc. So there's a huge gamut of things. But having said that, we are all here from the education sector. I think this is a good opportunity for us to hear directly from Dr. Amish, who is, in my opinion, one of the key people who will play a very big role in how education will roll out and how companies, organizations, etc., would get a chance to interplay among each other in such a way that they actually end up building an ecosystem that is required. So over to you, Pa Amish. And Pa, if you'd like to share any slides, let us know. You can have a share screen, and you are more than welcome to share any slides as you like. And the keynote address will be delivered by Pa Amish. Thank you so much, and over to you, Pa Amish.
Thank you, Pa Sachin. Very good afternoon for everyone and all the audiences joining this conference virtual. I think I should say many thank you to Pak Sachin and also Pak Jasmal and Pak Gogot, of course, for inviting me to be one of speakers in this conference. And I think I thought Pak Gogot is the right person to talk about this subject, as he was actually the head bureau of planning at working with the Ministry of Education and Cultures, and I am a colleague of him and working with him for quite a long time, and just want to share some ideas what actually we have done at our office at Bappenas, the Ministry of National Planning. And actually I am responsible for education sectors, and actually my counterpart is Pak Gogot at the MOEC. I want to share my screen and some PPTs. Let me check first. Yes. Can you read my screen?
Yes, Pak.
Yes, Pak.
Okay. Yeah, actually, Pak Nalin have already gave some very nice observation, some issues related to Indonesia on education and technology, and everything seems actually less perspective in regard to how Indonesia still left behind in terms of acquisition of technology and in relation to how to use technology for or in support for economic development, for education, and for improving the quality of public services. I just want to share with you all on educations, and mainly I will talk about problems and challenge for Indonesia and how to deal with some critical issues in order to provide very good education services for all Indonesian people. This some observation with reference to the publication done by National Bureau of Statistics, saying that the achievement of education, children, school age children, 7 to 18, actually the main years of schooling relatively very low, and based on the statistic at the 2019, it's just about 8.6 years, and this is very low, and we cannot say this. It should be, we have to take some strong effort to improve the years of schooling for all children from 7 to 18, and I think we targeted by the end of we call midterm development plan from 2020 to 2024. We want to increase the main years of schooling maybe at least 9.5 years at least. It equal to, it's considered very low, just junior secondary school at grade 3, I think. And compared to other countries, let's say at the Southeast Asian countries, actually Indonesia is very left behind, and then we have to improve our access for our children to get education services for all citizens under the between the age of 7 and 18. And this is also saying about the disparity of education participation among Indonesian citizens between age of 7 to 18. And although at the national level, gross enrollment ratio is about, this is at the senior secondary school, senior secondary level, it's about 88 or almost 84%. Those age at the people at the age of 16 and 18. But if we look at some provinces, there is very sharp differences. Some provinces have already reached very high percentage, like DKI Jakarta or Yogyakarta, but other provinces, mostly at the 3 provinces most populated provinces like East Java, Central Java, and also West Java. Some district within these provinces still left behind, while some district has already reached, let's say in Ciamis district in West Java, they have already reached about 120% of the population under the age of 16 up to 18. They already go to school until senior secondary schools. but other districts still left behind, like Sumedang and also Garut, or also Sukabumi. It's about just 55% they reach senior secondary schools. And this is the main problem of our countries, and mostly we have to address some critical problem, how to improve the access of education for school children under the age of 7 to 18. And this is, we also look at the how inequality of education in terms of socioeconomic status. We compare between the poorest and the richest one, and by level of education. As we can see on this figure, the color, blue color, saying that for those in the group of the richest groups, they have already reached a very high percentage. In 2019, they already reached about 95.26%, while the poorest groups just 70%. This kind of the differences, sub differences in terms of how we provide education services between these two different groups in terms of the socio-economic status. And up to the level of education, much higher level of education, then the differences much sharper. As we can look at the higher education, tertiary education between these two groups is very stunning. The differences between the rich and the poor, and this is actually the very critical problem that the government should address. And while actually during the last 2 decades, actually some efforts has actually impact on the increasing number of students from the poorest group, increasing from 2003% up to 70%. This significant increase in terms of providing, in terms of having enrolled in the school system for the poorest groups. But still, there is some sharp difference between these two groups. And there is also a figure on how population, at the age of 15 and above, and mostly our Indonesian population only reach level of education just junior secondary schools, junior secondary education, and basic education. It consists of about 55.5%, and just very few number, just 8.9% those who have reached higher education, completed tertiary education. This quite, I think, one of the biggest problem that we have to solve together as a nation. And then we at the Bappenas mainly focus on how to improve the access for those actually from coming from poor family and also from the remote area, because the differences of participation mostly because of two things, two reasons: geographic constraint and also financial constraint. And this is the figure that we can see all together. And this figure also says about the school age, the out of school children, those dropping out from school, and also because of economic reason, because of they have to go to get job and help their family to earn some money, and then they are forced to leave out the schools, and then they go to job markets under, I think because of they don't have any opportunity, they don't have any chance, and this mostly because of financial problem and financial hardships. And as we can look at this figure across the nation, the red dark reds indicates that this is mostly out of school children located. And we can see at the Java Island, mostly in East Java provinces, East Java province, Central Java, and also West Java. It consists more than 1 million, and the total number of out of school children is about 4.3 million. It's quite a huge number compared to the total number of school age children, about 55 millions. And about the quality, actually, we can refer to the PISA scores, as we can also observe last year has been published by we can check together, and Indonesia still left behind compared to other countries like Thailand and also Malaysia, Philippines. Even if we look at some big cities like Jakarta and also Yogyakarta, we can check on the reading, on mathematics and science, still left behind Malaysia and also let alone Singapore and also Brunei. The biggest cities like Jakarta and also Yogyakarta, mostly best schools located in, but still they are below all these countries. And these scores tend to decrease during the pandemic for about 8 months, as we experience, and we can check together and on the later slides. And this is I brought from the analysis from World Bank. We worked together, some experts from World Bank, and then they did some experiment how to predict the score of PISA of the Indonesian student on reading part. And during the pandemic, there is some tendencies that it will decrease about say 21 points from the current status 321 on the score for reading. But during the pandemic, for 6 months and for 8 months, there's some about 21 points decreasing. And this the analysis also implies that there is some differences between the main years of schooling, between schooling and also learning, compared to the capability, the quality of learning of Indonesian students. We can differentiate that although they have been in school system, but maybe they cannot learn maybe some degree and quality that need to be, I mean, they cannot reach the standard of quality in terms of learning, in terms of how to master some subject in math, in reading, and also in science. And these figures indicates some tendencies of decreasing in PISA scores among Indonesian students because of during the pandemic. And what actually the Indonesian government have done actually by giving some intervention intervention in order to increase the opportunity for students to get enrolled in the school by giving them what we call Kartu Indonesia Pintar, Indonesia Smart Card. This program promoted by Pak Jokowi in order to assure that all school-age children have to be in the school system, and all the operational costs also covered by the government, what we call BOS, and also some scholarship, and also some special budget we call DAK, special budget dedicated and also allocated directly, distributed directly, spent for education services in order to improve the equity of education across the country and directly given to the local government. While also we provide some program on teacher training in order to improve the quality of learning. And we also have produced some document of planning, planning for education sector 2002, 2020 and 2024. And we conceptualize why we have to focus on human capital and mainly on education sector, because this very critical element and become the pillar of development for the whole country in order to support economic growth, in order to support social development and everything. And there is no doubt that education has contributed to the increase of quality of life of people, and also the quality of the in terms of the acquisition of knowledge and skills and also technology. And there is some pillars of development in support of human capital sectors. And there is some priority program. We have to address two things simultaneously: equity of education and also quality of education. In terms of equity, we have to provide social infrastructure by building schools and also campus and also education facilities. And in terms of quality of education, we have to improve the training for teachers and also school of education, college teaching for producing good and standards teacher in support of promoting quality of education for all Indonesian people. And the most important thing is Pak Jokowi, for the last 5 years, he already decided that Indonesia need to move forward and begin what we call 12 years compulsory education, that all school age children from 7 to 9 have to be enrolled in school system. And that's why the government should facilitate them to go to school for basic education, junior secondary education, senior secondary education, all those things we call 12 years universal education. And this is also part of our effort to improve the competitiveness and productivity, mostly focus on higher education and also vocational education, while we also focus on how to improve the capability for innovation and also for technology, because acquisition of technology and innovation is very important in support of economic development as well as the competitiveness of the nation. And look at the number 1 and 2 and also 3. All these three are part of elements of the priority program we call improving productivity and competitiveness. This is part of what we call MPJMN, Medium Term Development Plan 2020 and 2024. And this is a very searching policy strategies, how to improve equity and quality of education. And mostly we have to start with the early childhood development, holistic and integrative. We take the approach holistic and integrative, not only in terms of education, but also nutrition, health, and also protection and parenting. And we also pay some attention to some remote areas that most people living there, residing there, they don't have the similar or equal opportunity to get to or to access education, like mostly in the eastern part of Indonesia. And while we also need to respond the importance of STEM, science, technology, and also engineering and mathematics, and by emphasizing also the use of technology for learning, especially innovation, learning innovation based on the digital transformation. And this is particularly relevant as we live in the period of pandemic, COVID-19 pandemics. And again, that improving the quality of teacher is very important and very central, because there is no quality of education unless we also provide quality teachers. And the last slides, we talk about higher education. This is also very important part. Then we have to strengthen the higher education institution, partly as they have to play three important roles: scientific development, technology innovation, and also innovative research. And this is also relate to how the government also encourage universities and higher education institutions to develop strategic partnership with private sectors in order to make them involved in the innovative research, in order to produce some innovation and also technology innovation in support of improving the quality of higher education. And we also need to look at the importance of how to look the alternative sources of funds to finance higher education. And philanthropy, private sectors need to be involved, and by mobilizing public fund and also private budget from private sectors, it will help higher education to improve facilities and also services for Indonesian students that need to go to university. And we also, this is we have to pay some focus and attention to how we should determine the mission of differentiation while Indonesia promote research university or teaching university or vocational university. And all this thing is very important in order to produce quality of graduate with knowledge and skill and mastering technology. I think all these things that I can share with you all, and hope this will looking forward for any response and thought from the audience. Thank you, Pak Sachin.
Thank you, Pak Amish. And I must say, Pak Amish, this presentation that you put together, I hope you can share it later, Pak, with the group, is a fantastic grounding of not only where we are and what we're doing about it, but what we plan to do. And I think I see so many initiatives that are being actually put out here, and I'm familiar with some of them because I have met people doing some of the initiatives that you have put out here. It's fascinating, Pak. So I'm just going to ask you one or two questions before we move to the next speaker, Pak. And there will be some more Q&A that will keep coming in the chat box, and we'll address that as we go, Pak. The question I have in my mind is, these problems are typical of countries with large populations. Any country with large population has huge, tremendous challenges on infrastructure, human resource in terms of being able to have good quality teachers. And if you're a developing nation, it's even more, because there are larger population countries which are able to handle the scale of education. So a question, and it's not a question specifically to you, Par, but what I mean is it's an observation, is this current model that we are trying to reinforce, are we reinforcing a regressive model? Or is there something completely new that will help countries like this facing these challenges to completely make a jump the hoop? This is the reason why there is so much disruption happening now. There's technology disruption, there is educational curriculum disruption. But I think the basic need for education is being questioned. As to how much do you need to learn in order to get a job? And what's the least amount of education you need so that you get that job? The rest of the education can be put into as a sideline. So people are questioning. I'm not saying that's the right way or wrong way, but these are the kind of questions that are being posed, and companies across the world, like the Googles, the Amazon, the Microsofts of the world, the Intels of the world, are head-on facing, trying to find solutions to these questions. Because end of the day, the education is, yes, of course, it makes you a better human being, and builds empathy around how you build your country and your communities. But the practical side of education is resulting in a job or the ability to create jobs. So finding the right balance between those things, I think, is the real challenge. And I think, Amish, thank you very much. You put in, some very concrete plans, which I see very encouraging. Like we always say, you may start somewhere at the bottom, but that is exactly the opportunity. The opportunity is because the market is underserved. If I had $10 million, I would not go to Singapore or US. I would actually come to a country where there is an opportunity. And the opportunity presented here is, I think, going to be groundbreaking, because not only is it because the government has got now the wherewithal to actually do something about this, but on top of that, you have another challenge thrown by the pandemic. And a combination of many things might actually end up accelerating the path forward. So thank you, Paramish. I'm going to focus some other questions to you a little later. I'm going to ask Jaspal to come in. Jaspal is going to address K-12 education and also share a little bit about some of the things that he has done here. But I think Jaspal, in my opinion, is on the cusp of what we believe is a change in the game, the way the game is played. The challenges of infrastructure, the challenges of teachers, all of that it's a very complex solution. And I think Jaspal has got international recognition for having found answers to some of these very tough questions. So over to you, Jaspal. Jaspal, you're on.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Parmish, first of all, I want to say it was a real pleasure listening to you. And I feel that the current government is doing so much for the education sector. So it gives us a lot of confidence. And I also want to say, for me, it's a pleasure to work with the Indonesian Education Forum, where I'm an advisor. I've been in Indonesia for more than 25 years. Pokoknya udah seluruh Indonesia, Pak, udah di Aceh, udah di Lampung, di Kalimantan. Jadi udah orang Indonesia lah, kalau bilang dangdut lah, Maggie Z, kayak siapa kayak juga kenal semua, Pak, ya. But I always tell people, paspor saya paspor Singapura, tapi hati saya agak merah putih. Karena I've seen a lot of poverty in Indonesia, and I have decided, I was active in the construction sector. I was involved in Bayan, the 6th largest coal mine, but I moved out to focus on education. So what I wanted to share, and I always ask everyone I apologize, because I'm a blunt speaker. I love the country and I want to see changes, and I'm going to share what an operator sees. So if you can help me share the screen. Can I get the screen sharing? Yep. Okay. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah, I can see.
Okay, first of all, like I say, kudos to the government. Now, I just want to slightly take a step back, right? We all know the fact we are here today, Pak Gogot, Nalin, Shuab, Sachin, all of us, round tables with you, Pak Amish, so many people, we understand the benefits of education. So I'll explain to you who we are. So whichever developing country we go to, Myanmar, India, our main aim is to ensure every child receives a quality education. And we do that because we know it will enrich their knowledge, it will give them an opportunity for employment, very important, self-respect. And with that job, they will come back and contribute to the development of the country, and also just be a global citizen. Now, we should not underestimate these important things, and we should not underrate the efforts that we all put. So who are we? I am the founder of the CIS group of schools and these Inspirasi schools. I am a son of a Satpam in Singapore. And I understand how education, my parents have sacrificed their lives for education. And when I came to Indonesia, I saw the disparity in education. So I think the private sector has a role to play. And I want to share with you some of the things we have done. I want to share with you my frustrations. I also want to share with you my areas of satisfaction. So whichever country we go to, whether it's Indonesia, Myanmar, India, whichever developing countries, I always look at this line. Where is the public school line? And then I look at the most expensive school. So we all know there is a school in Indonesia where the school fees are more than $28,000 per year per child. It's okay. This is where diplomats' children go to. This is where CEOs' children go to. But one level of society can only go to this. Now, when you do schools, when you price schools, I always tell people, never price 10% below, never price 15% because you're always playing in the same sector. So what I did, I halved that to 14,000 tuition fee, ya, Pak, ya? A tuition fee per year per child. And I did one school in South Jakarta. But when I saw that school at 14,000 was still very expensive, I halved that to 7,000 per year per child. And I opened up schools in North, East, and West Jakarta. But 7,000 is extremely expensive. So I opened new schools and I halved that even to 4,000. I opened schools in Sumatra, in Java, and in West Java. Low, tapi 4,000 my father, you say anak satpam juga nggak mampu kan, it's still expensive. So I halved that to 2,000. And I opened some schools in South Sumatra. And I'm expanding these schools through another brand called Inspirasi. Now, we also have similar schools in Myanmar, India. I have one school in Korea. Right now, we are looking at other opportunities in Vietnam and Africa. Our partner is the World Bank. We are partly funded by the IFC, which is the International Finance Corporation. And we are a network of schools. I would like everyone to keep in mind this word network because I'll explain to you why that word is important. We are going to move to Surabaya. We are looking at Bandung. We are also looking at Makassar. But as Pak Nalin has shown, Jakarta is the activity. Everywhere else, it tapers down. Similarly for pricing. After Jakarta, Surabaya, Bandung, Bali, it goes all the way down. People cannot afford this kind of schools. So we are looking to build these kind of schools and even below to all the rest of the provinces. Lampung, I spent a year in Lampung, Malang, Samarinda, some of these. This is where we need to look at a different kind of school. Now, the strength of our school is all the students in our school, they interact with their peers, students and teachers, with other students in Seoul, because we've got a school there, we got several schools in India, Myanmar, and very soon in other countries. You cannot believe the amount of exposure these students get when they do projects. Our Indonesian students are doing projects with Myanmar. So can you imagine across borders, using technology, frustrated over technology, getting up early, looking at time? That's the exposure. So they have become a truly international global citizen by interacting. So this is a truly international experience. Similarly for Inspirasi, as I go to Lampung, those students will be doing projects with India, with Africa. So that's the strength. Our students from 14,000 right down to $4,000, they have gone to some of the top universities in the world. And some of the students have been given top awards, top in outstanding, top in the world, top in the world. So there are a few more. I didn't put a lot of this, but have a look at the universities that they've gone to. I have proven that you don't need to pay high prices to send your schools, your children to top universities. And how did I do that? Those schools collaborate. They mix. Anyone in the school at the bottom end of the pyramid, let's say teacher Fatima sitting in Palembang, she needs something, all she has to do is reach out to maybe the expat teacher sitting in Jakarta. That exposure is immediately brings in impact. And that's why I say in conferences, the reason a lot of the public schools don't do well, because when public school collaborate with public school, you get dull ideas. When public school collaborate with private schools vertically up, it's amazing. And for that, we were awarded, Sachin alluded to this, thank you, Sachin. We were given the World Transformational Award for Education by Financial Times and the IFC World Bank. This was a big moment for us. And I would like you to know this award was based on impact. They wanted to know how is it that we could bring prices down and keep bringing prices down and still have impact. As I go down the ladder, my teachers are all Indonesians. So who says Indonesian teachers apa namanya, don't have the skill. The only problem is they are not exposed to different practices. They are close to their own practices, but because we let them collaborate, the results are fantastic. And I take this story. I'm very, very proud of our success in Indonesia. I take the Indonesian story. I've gone to Cape Town, I've spoken in Dubai, to India, to Kazakhstan, to Nigeria, and I tell them the power of the Indonesian teachers, the power of how we are able to train these teachers. So we take these stories up. There's a new project that I'm doing. Pa Amish mentioned this, teachers. We cannot hire and recruit teachers the same way. So I'm very curious. How does Google, how does Facebook, how does Apple, how does Ritz-Carlton, Marriott, how do they hire innovative, passionate individuals? So we are working with Deloitte and we're looking at outside the education sector and inside the education sector. These are the people that I have had a lot of conversation. I was very happy I had a chance to meet the vice president of Facebook, and they told us how they train people. And we are going to come out with a new document on how we can better train teachers using ideas from outside the education industry and inside. So these are the way we'll be looking at. And it's important, right? Because as I go down the pyramid, I'm going to make my prices, the tuition fee cheaper. So I need to find fresh graduates from universities in Indonesia. How do I train them to be passionate? This is what we are doing, and there's some very interesting findings. We are also involved in public-private partnership, where we offer internships and inter-school projects with public schools. So wherever we go, public-private partnerships are important. So that's the background about myself. Okay. Let's talk about investing in K-12 education sector. First thing, what do education investors look for? These are the 6 things they look for. They want to know whether you have a market. And now, given the way the world has changed, I can tell you a lot of funds are looking for impact. Impact funds, private equity funds, they all are moving to impact. And they want it to be sustainable and measurable. Why? Because their funders, their LPs, those who are putting money into their funds are saying, hang on, I don't want you to throw this money in any area. I want you to show me the impact. It could be women empowerment. It could be promoting women in going into schools, education, anything. This is a big thing right now. It's quite easy to find money if you're able to show this. They want to know it's a very stable business. Is it robust? Of course, every investor look for fair returns, and they also want to look at ease of entry and exit of the investments and consistency of regulation. So keep these 66 things in mind. I'll be sharing a little bit on this. So first of all, is there really a market in Indonesia? There is. And I tell you why. COVID-19. You know what COVID-19 has done besides ruining our lives? COVID-19 has shown that the education sector is stable and robust. I'm talking about K-12, yeah? Parents want their children back in school. Ya udah, mereka udah pusing anaknya di rumah. They want their kids back in school. So all those gurus who says technology is going to take over K-12 schools are silent now, because it will not be a disruptor at this point of time. Maybe a couple of, maybe 2-3 decades down the line, maybe right now, no, but technology will be a complemental of K-12 education. Hybrid, using of those LMS and EdTech company services that Pat Nalin showed. So believe me when I tell you that there is so much of interest in K-12 because people have realized that parents want their kids back in school. So in Singapore, investors are worried about investing in tours, in tour operators, in restaurants, because people can stay home and eat, but not this. So this is very interesting. How big is the Indonesian market? So this is from McKinsey. McKinsey says it's a 40 billion private education. Now, private education is defined from all the way from kindergarten to higher education, polytechnics, university, college, everything put together. And look at the CAGR growth, about 7.2% growth. So what we did 2 years ago, we did our own study, and our estimate is the K to 12 market is about $4 to $5 billion market. This is our estimate. We've got a few consultants to work it, but I wanted to share this with you. Now, the question is, if the K to 12 sector is attractive, loh, investornya di mana? How come they're not rushing in? They're not, because I just showed you it's a sizable market. 4 to 5 billion is a big amount. And education is impact. Imagine I do a school in Lampung, and I show how I raise the community's upbringing, their income level, their life. People love the story. And I just showed you how it is a robust sector. COVID-19, they want everyone to go back to school. The children want, parents want, so it's robust. Where are the investors? They hesitate because the Indonesian K to 12 education sector is one of the world's most regulated sector. It is very difficult to bring in investments into K to 12. Very difficult. And I will show you why, and I will explain why today. You know, I get very passionate. I can speak Pak Sachin, no, I get to the point, but today I'll only talk about 3 things. 3 major areas that I want to highlight. 1, the yayasan, the foundation. So this is the single only entity that's given a license to operate a school. Okay. This yayasan gets the school fees because he is the only one to operate the license. And then he works with an asset company, land and building. Clearly, you need a school. Schoolnya, you need land, you need building, you need swimming pool, or maybe not swimming pool, you need a bit of tempat parkir, segala macam, land and building. You see this structure? Look at the problem. Personal liabilities. If you are a member of a yayasan, you don't have limited liabilities. It's personal. Besok, kalau ada masalah, if there's any problem and some parents come suing the yayasan, everybody in the yayasan are in trouble. Number 2, inability to raise funding. How do you raise funding in a yayasan? Number 3, how do you provide returns from a yayasan? Because it's non-profit, there is no questions of shareholding. There's no there is no dividends. There's nothing. And because it's a yayasan, I can't form JVs with other companies. Nobody will want to form a JV. So I wrote a note together with a few people to Pak Makarim sometime back. I hope he got my note. And I told him, if you would like the K to 12 sector to flourish, this is one of the biggest problems. So the solutions is you got to look at limited companies. Now, I know politically, people will say, oh, you nggak bisa bikin profit in K to 12, you this. Many countries are doing it. There are many ways to restrict certain framework. I also want you to know that the yayasan is taxed exactly the same as a private limited company. So don't think, lo dikasih yayasan, you nggak perlu bayar pajak. No, exactly the same. Everything is the same. In Thailand, you don't have to. Can you imagine? But here you do. So let's talk about, so number 2, licensing. Before, you have all kinds of schools, national school, national plus school, international school, segala macam. And there was a lot of confusion. So thank you to the government. They only put it into 2 buckets. Schools with national curriculum and schools with international curriculum, which they call SPK, Satuan Pendidikan Nasional. That's clarity. But sorry, I've been in Indonesia for a long time. Pokoknya kalau ada clarity, pasti ada masalah. Surely there'll be an angle somewhere. So, watch this. You want to start a school with an international curriculum? You cannot. You have to start a school with national curriculum first. Only when you can show the authorities that I have done a great job, can you run an international curriculum. And let me explain to you, if I want to run an international curriculum, and then I'm asked to run a national curriculum, can you imagine the amount of resources, the cost and the time to do this and then convert that to here? It is almost like saying, I want to go to Paris and London to see what Paris and London is looking like. But you say, no, you go to Papua first, you go to Lampung first, you go there first and show me what you have learned before I send you overseas. And the irony is the national curriculum is always changing. Even this is sometimes hard to run. But wait, more issues around jurisdiction of regulation. The national curriculum is usually liaised, controlled, regulated by the provincial government. This one here is controlled by the central government. So can you imagine how to do this? You have to do this, get approval, then you have to come here. Now let's look at the last point, the land and building. You remember this structure I showed you when I first started? You remember the yayasan I already explained to you? The fees goes into the yayasan and then you do land and building. Apparently there's a law now that says the land and building cannot be rented. And there's another law, which is sometimes used, sometimes not used, depending who you talk to, that says you cannot do a school, but you have to do many buildings. Kindergarten needs a building, primary needs a building, secondary needs a building, high school needs a building. Okay, we understand the reason. Maybe safety, right? Place to play, but there is no school in the world that does this. If it's safety, then tell us what are the safety precautions, but not say you need to build a separate building. So let me share something with you. Imagine this law is in place. It is in place. I tell you the difficulties. Okay, I have a school here. I have an investor who says, I want to build a school. Just to give everyone a feel, building a school for about 1,000 students with roughly international standards. Karena international curriculum kan, jadi you have to have international standards lah. So swimming pool, apa segala macam, cost $4 to $5 million. The building only, yeah. You need about 1 million of fixtures and fittings, computer, laboratory, tables, chairs, technology, about 1 million. You need a working capital of 1.5. Because imagine the land is rented, ya kan? You rent the land from somebody for 30, 40 years, you can have to pay. Sometimes they will say 5 tahun ke depan, ya kan? Sometimes they say kasih deposit segala macam. So you have to look at that. Total investment. Oops, I'm stuck. Can I go back in again? Sorry.
No problem.
Yeah. Can I just go back in again? Yep. Can you see this?
Yeah, can see.
Can see. Okay. So if you add all this, it's about $6.7 million. And I can tell you as an operator, it usually takes 4 to 5 years before you have positive cash flow. I didn't say return on investment, yeah. I said positive cash flow. Now comes Some places, they say you cannot. You have to buy land. So for 1,000 students, you need about 10,000 square meters. I need additional 15 to 20 million, depending on where the land is. You know how land prices in Indonesia, right? Then what do I need? Imagine I have to put TK here, SD, TK, primary, secondary, high school, I separate. Separate buildings mean higher construction costs. I have to construct 3 times and additional operational costs. I have to have separate people here. I have to have separate people here. I have to have separate people here. You know, there's an audience watching. Can you imagine if I had that kind of 15, 20 million, how much I can spend on training and technology? Today, I can raise money and put schools, cheaper schools, mid-price schools in many parts of Indonesia. But we are hesitant because of this kind of regulations. So they hesitate. They hesitate because Indonesia is one of the most regulated sector. India has also a yayasan, but India doesn't ask you to buy a land, doesn't ask you to put in different buildings, etc. So there's a lot to learn. So what has happened in the education sector so far, given all this? Pak Amesh mentioned PISA. Please have a look at this very, very shocking chart. See where Indonesia is. See where Singapore is. One of the countries I always ask people to keep an eye is Vietnam. Vietnam was somewhere here, and it is slowly coming up here. I'm willing to bet 10,000 bucks. Vietnam will move up here very soon. Vietnam has the most active private sector education. The government has opened it. They have come up with some laws, and people are rushing to Vietnam. And Indonesia is here. I also want you to see this. The last 10 years, Indonesia has been here. Indonesia is even below non-OECD countries and OECD countries. Look where Singapore is. Now, you can say, yeah, kan Singapore kecil, blah, blah. No, the Singapore's regulation on private sector education is not at all anything like Indonesia's regulated sector. So, where's the market? I know I've got a short time. I get very passionate, sorry. But let me move on to the last few slides. Okay, if Pak Jokowi, Pak Makarim, Pak Amish, Pak Gotot says, okay, I solve your problem. Where is the market? Remember this chart I showed you, right? If you start dividing 2,000, further 1,000, you'll be here. If you divide 1,000 by 500, you're coming to public school sector. In those countries like Singapore, like Hong Kong, the market is here, around school fees for 7,000 upwards. Why? Because in those countries, the public sector is very strong. People go to the public sector. So this, they open for those who can really, pokoknya ada CEO lah, they have some money, they open this. In Indonesia, the market is everywhere. We have studied, so our Inspirasi school will be here. God willing, inshallah, sometimes later, I will cut it to $1,000 and make it cheaper. And then one day, 500. This is what I'm trying to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, in Indonesia is the whole market. That's why it's a $5 billion K-12 market. I just added this slide when Pak Amish was talking about accessibility to education. Some parts of Indonesia is very difficult for people to. So I think if I can recommend public-private partnership, that's another good model where the government can provide infrastructure and the private will run it under an agreed framework, or what you call build, operate, transfer. The Middle East is very strong. I was involved in one project there. I think Philippines also has this, which means pemerintah will say, look, you build one, I will build, you build, you run under the framework, but after some time, you please train the Indonesian teacher and you transfer back to us. Now, there are countries with very successful PPP. Singapore is one. I explained to you, Middle East is very, very strong. In fact, Middle East is one of the strongest PPP models in many parts of the world. And I'm very happy to share it one day. And of course, the US itself. US, they got the charter schools, yeah? The charter schools where they work, they ask private sector to run it, but restricted in school fees. They use the what's that word where they they restrict the fees. Government pays the fees. Last slide. Wherever I go, whether any developing countries, I always push for public partnership. The schools that we do must be scalable, impactful, sustainable. We keep innovating. That's why we look at different ways to identify teachers. And as you know, I'm very sorry if I'm blunt, but I mean what I say. We share and learn. Thank you very much. We must join our hands and lift this wonderful archipelago to its fullest potential. And the Indonesian Education Forum is an outstanding forum to do that. Thank you for giving me the privilege.
Thank you, Jaspal. Very nicely put, Jaspal. Two things that stand out. One is, of course, your own work, which is phenomenal. That model is something that I think we should look at more closely and see how we can help to get a better understanding of how such kind of models would work. The second part, of course, was some of the opportunities that you outlined. I think you have it spot on. That the entire market is open. There are so many different models that can coexist just because the sheer size of the market. Indonesia is the 4th largest, and there's so much to do, so much opportunity. It's just a matter of which part of the elephant do you hold it by the tail or by the trunk or by the legs or by the ears. Right? It's typically that. And I think the market is open. It is very welcoming to new ideas. I think it's very welcoming to new concepts, new thinking. And as you could have seen from Amish's presentation, there are so many initiatives by the government which allows people to reach out and allows to engage with the private sector. Now it's just a matter of the private sector actually knowing how exactly to go about it and seeing certain visible projects actually happen. So I'm going to now go over to Oliver. Oliver has been waiting very patiently. We have a 20-minute presentation from Oliver from Ask Consulting. Maybe Oliver, you could also give a short introduction to Ask. And we'll hear a lot more about how we see investing in the higher education sector. Because, as you know, when you finish with K-12 and you're looking at the job market, the higher education is exactly that bridge. And all eyes are on higher education now as people look for more and more people that they can hire. So that's the real gap is going to be sorted out in that sector. Over to you, Oliver.
Thanks, Sachin. Can you give me screen share, please? Okay,
yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, you got that?
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Sachin, Shoaib, who's coming shortly, Nalin, Pat Amish, and of course, Jaspal. I actually supported Jaspal in a lot of that narrative that he's talking about there, and it's very close to my heart what Jaspal has achieved and the power of his narrative and what he does. It's truly amazing, and I encourage all of you to dig a little deeper into what Jaspal does. So it's fantastic. So just a bit of an introduction to what we do at Ask Consulting. I appreciate Sachin telling us we're specialists in higher ed. Actually, we're a legal and strategy advisory. We deal a lot with foreign investment into Indonesia, mergers and acquisition, operationalizing businesses within Indonesia, so that there's a lot of structuring work, there's a lot of government liaison, there's a lot of financing work as well around that. About 80% of our work is in the education space, the ed sector. Formal and non-formal, K-12, obviously, as Jaspal spoke about, higher ed, T&E, ed tech, other supports services around the education space. So that's what we do. I'll address higher ed and transnational education issues in this presentation, but really some of the learnings are picking up on the theme of what's already been presented by Nalin in the EdTech, Paamish in the public sector, and Jaspal in the K-12. What I'll say will probably be contentious, I don't mean it in that way at all. The facts are the facts, the numbers are the numbers. My analysis, our team's analysis is one thing, and our recommendations are obviously consistent with that. Hopefully we can bring this discussion together to make Shoaib's life easy in terms of the guy who has to go away and write the report of what we've been speaking about. So as a opener, really, the investment space around education in Indonesia is strong, has been strong, and is getting stronger. We've had a lot of inquiries from Q3 and now Q4 for M&A work, and we've been dealing with foreign investment work as well since last year and continuing into this year, predominantly in the K-12, increasingly in the higher ed and the edtech spaces as well. And so we'll touch on all those parts as we go forward. Now, the context around Indonesia, for those of you who've been stuck in front of Zoom and or going to conferences in the past or webinars, there's always some smart analyst at the end who's asked for his big tip about the world or Southeast Asia, and it's always, oh, Indonesia's the next big thing. So rightly or wrongly, whether that can be actualized or not is another question. So what we'll do over the next 15-20 minutes is explore what some of the speakers have already spoken about, is what is the context, what are the opportunities, some of the structure and the regulations around that, and how can we really unleash the beast? How can we make sure that the education sector in Indonesia over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years really reaches its full potential and does become the next big thing, rather than the perennial default answer at some of the webinars that you go to. So just to set the context, this data may well be at odds with some of the other data that you've heard, and this comes, we triangulate our data, this comes from a number of sources. The Indonesian K-12 landscape is, as of 2019, was a 1.2 billion market, with Jaspal's K-12 sector about 350 million, and most of it in the higher ed space. That compares to Singapore at 2 billion higher ed market. Again, this is data from last year. The current spend in the private sector for education in Southeast Asia alone is 60 billion. So you're probably getting the picture here. EdTech itself is huge, as Nalin has mentioned. I won't go into that in too much detail here. Predominantly led by India, China, and America, with most of the deals. And you can see the size of the growth and over the next 5 years, and the size of the market, and what's actually happening deal size in Indonesia is actually quite small. Excuse me. Oh, we gone into hang. Hang on, guys. Can we come out of this section? Oh, no, we're back. Sorry, it's okay. Sorry.
No problem.
So this is slightly less of a valuation than Nalin's of the global education market in 2025. This is because of a recent change in valuation in the higher education sector, a downward valuation, which I'll mention a bit later on. But the point here is you've got the 4th most populous country in the world, really languishing in terms of private sector spend compared to the rest of the region, its neighbors, and globally, and in terms of what is going to be projected. We'll explore why that is now, some possible solutions for it. Now, on the plus side, the demand drivers for higher ed and T&E, transnational education, actually remain the same. And of course, they revolve around a few key areas. You have very socially mobile, young population in Indonesia. So there's the affordability, there's the capacity and supply and demand issue. And of course, there's some drivers around choice and value. They remain the same. These aren't unique to Indonesia and higher ed. They're actually filtered down into the K-12 space as well. So that's the context with Indonesia. Let's just have a quick peek at some of the key considerations for investing of why higher ed and K-12 and transnational education are so attractive to investors, and probably will remain so. Obviously, the big pluses for higher ed and K-12 is the long-term visibility on revenue. Unlike any other industry, it's a defensible industry as well. Negative working capital is of course, plays a huge role in that. The second column, the barriers to entry, we'll touch on those shortly. I think Jaspal's been pretty vocal on that, and we're aligned on our thoughts there. So the underlying principles, the key assumptions, the fundamentals for investing in the education space, particularly higher ed, particularly K-12, remain the same. Now, impact of regulations. This is what Indonesia is doing within the context of Southeast Asia. And our conversations with investors looking to come into Indonesia generally fall into two buckets. One, it's, yep, we're super comfortable with the structure within Indonesia. It's no problem to us. We have exposure in Southeast Asia and the rest of the world. Conversely, at the other end, you can imagine, well, we don't even have the conversations with those investors because they steer clear of it. Now, the foreign ownership, as Jaspal was saying, at 100%, we'll speak about the details of the structure next. But really, your ownership, your direct ownership, isn't direct at all, because you're sitting in a yayasan, which is a non-for-profit, or I'll qualify that. It's an entity that you cannot distribute profits. So it makes any form of ownership, any form of profit repatriation, or generating direct profits for the school, it stymies that growth. Now, if you refer to some of the other speakers' data of what is happening in Southeast Asian countries, as Jaspal was saying, Vietnam, their growth, even on the PISA metric that Indonesia likes to use now, has really been down to opening up the private market, and Malaysia as well. Malaysia, as you probably know, has within the ministry, it has its own private education division dedicated to obviously private education needs. Indonesia is the outlier in Southeast Asia, and it's really stymieing the market. So, but saying that, there's always a but. These are some of the laws and regulations around higher ed. Now, we're not going to go through them, don't worry, but what you can see in learning here, these are all relatively new regulations and changes to the law to engage the private sector, which is great. The environment now, particularly around higher education within the relevant ministry, is fantastic. We had, our company and our team had a session with Prof. Nizam and Prof. Aris, the Dirjen and the director of the Directorate of Higher Ed last week, around a couple of other projects we're doing. These guys speak the same language as everyone else. They reiterate and they operationalize the message from the current administration, Jokowi administration, and their minister, that really they are there to drive the standards of education. And one of the key ways to do that is to engage the private sector. Now that sounds like it sits at odds with Jaspal's experiences, and without comparing, it does. The K-12 landscape is very different. And even though it's a lot more developed than the higher ed market in terms of investment, conversely, actually, it's regulatory wise, it's not as open as higher ed. So I just wanted to share a little bit more about Jaspal's point here about the structure and some of the solutions around that. If you want to establish a foreign university within Indonesia, I'm going to share some snapshots of slides from a longer presentation that we do with T&E partners looking to come into Indonesia. There are three main options. You've got a standalone university. These are some of the requirements. You can't see it clearly, it doesn't matter. You've got a JV. Both of these are basically bricks and mortar universities. And of course, you've got the T&E type option, which is basically you're a service provider. Kind of for those outside Indonesia, it's more of a franchise opportunity. So there's a long list of requirements. There are funding options available from the government for options 1 and 2, and indeed option 3 as well. You've probably heard consortium of Singapore universities got a sizable funding from the Indonesian government. MIT, I think, got 20 million in a research grant. So there are incentives from the government about partnering with local universities or PPP or creating your own standalone institution. Now, what we tried to do is distill the structure into these couple of slides, and they look very basic, but what sits behind that, is Jaspal very well articulated, is quite a convoluted structure of PTs, limited companies, representation issues, linkages, agreements that are probably overly complicated, unnecessarily so. They put investors off, frankly, and they make it very difficult to really grow your business here. And then the final one is the basically it's the franchise agreement. It's probably erroneously called that. You have two options. Basically, on the left, you have a management style approach. We have a management agreement, and you'll deliver back-end consultation, or the more interesting route on the right-hand side, which is basically a cooperation agreement you'll have with a local partner to deliver things like dual degrees, teacher training, transfer of knowledge, and those types of things. So those are the three main options, but essentially the first two, if you want any kind of substantial presence in Indonesia, are still built around the non-entity, the yayasan, the non-for-profit entity, which is the yayasan. And of course, some of the issues around that are, again, overly complicated. The idea of structure and control and representation, of course, transfer pricing, there are tax issues. And actually with all three, you still have the challenge of quality assurance. So that's, in a nutshell, the regulatory landscape and the structure of higher ed. So I just want to go very quickly through the landscape of higher education in Indonesia. And for this, I've lent on a lot of input from our partners in the UK, Cormac Consulting Group. They specialize in strategic advisory in higher education in the UK. And this is some key data. Now, this may well be at odds with what Pak Amish has, but I think that's one of the issues. There's no central database or central source of data that we can rely on in Indonesia. The big issue here is the gross enrollment ratio. Obviously, what that means is there's space to grow. If you compare that to the GER of a developed country like Germany, I think that's at the top. That's got like 88% GER. Most of the enrollments are in the private education space for higher education, meaning there's obviously confidence, more confidence in the private market than the public market. And of course, as Amish was saying, very low graduate ratios with regards to STEM, which shows an opportunity for foreign providers to come in as well. Huge amount more of private higher education institutes than public, which obviously emphasizes the first point, we believe in the private sector. And excuse me. Just a couple of points to highlight here is that in 2018, there was the regulation to build branch campuses, standalone campuses, which obviously Monash have done. So there was obviously a very positive change in regulations. And how that is operationalized by the ministry is also very supportive to higher education. So as Jaspal rightly said, some of those key enablers to investing in Indonesia, we're checking the boxes here. There's opportunity, there's belief in the private sector, And of course, there's regulatory and ministerial support for that as well. Again, just I'm cognizant of time, but there's a lot of support again from the ministry, still inviting formal applications for partnerships in public and private sector universities within Indonesia. And this will give you an idea of what's actually happening in the landscape in terms of some of the JVs and partnerships out there. Apart from Monash, Monash built its own branch campus. There it is at the top. And just to highlight the one at the bottom, London Metropolitan Uni in Raffles, it's actually should be a blended learning BA that they offer. It's actually fully online, which is great because it shows that there is flexibility and understanding within the ministry. Because if you look at the regulatory landscape, you're not actually supposed to deliver an online degree, only online degrees. Again, a lot of acceptance from the ministry around technology and encompassing that and what it means for T&E. So I just wanted to touch a bit more on the ed tech space. And this is built around the same report that Nalim was speaking about by the World Bank, which is a great starting point if you happen to have a look at it. I think it would be erroneous if we didn't look at the ed tech space, because the delivery of higher ed will be built around ed tech solutions, whatever they may be. So our understanding was slightly different than Pak Nalim's. The outlook is obviously potentially huge in this country. There are issues around funding, and there are obviously a lot of constraints on the supply and demand side. And we don't want to be glib about this at all, but if the government can overcome this, and here's a couple of solutions, then it should be all systems go, and the edtech space should be really flourishing. Because at the moment, there's, quite frankly, there's apart from the big players in the edtech space in Indonesia, there isn't much else for the time being. So looking at this now from the investors' side, which we represent investors, and so we have to give them a good advice of what to look at, and really we try and direct investors to looking at operators that built around these 4 key pillars. I know the Indonesian Education Forum pays a lot of credence to Education 4.0, World Economic Forum's paper about that, and really educational institutions, regardless if it's K-12, vocational, language learning, higher ed, are built around these 4 pillars here. And really, if you're an educational institution and you're not doing all of these, your business model, your education model will become outmoded extremely quickly. So most of the operators that we deal with are embracing this as well now. So just a quick review of where we stand. These are some of the insights of the private market. Again, great social mobility, which relates to issues of affordability, not just in the higher education space, supportive macro, of course, and really a very positive regulatory landscape, particularly for the higher education space. And notwithstanding the ISN issue, I'm sure Jasper would like me to add there. Learning angle, we looked at the opportunities for T&E. What is worth speaking about, perhaps, although not on this session, is the disruption around center-based learning, bricks and mortar schools and universities, and the challenges of those. And of course, from an investment lens, as Jaspal said, you're probably looking at a movement away from PE-backed investment and limited horizon there. Impact investment, we've noticed very sharp uptake. And from the investor side, and actually from the operator as well, we've noticed that the smart plays are really around building a platform, and not just a platform around universities or K to 12, but vertical platform right the way through from K to 12 to higher ed, and laterally as well in terms of building out your service provision, a number of subject program offerings around that. And in terms of the valuations in the market themselves, I mean, even if you're just a layman and looking inside some of the deals that have been done in the ed space, particularly the K to 12, this will put a smile on Jasper's face, I'm sure. Some of the multiples around that are absolutely eye-watering compared to other industries and other sectors. So all in all, a very positive landscape. There's still a lot of interest in Indonesia. Final slide from us is really what's next. And as I mentioned at the beginning, potential downgrade in market size for the higher ed, contraction of fees, upskilling of other alternatives, and of course, digitization to reduce the cost base. That means quite a significant drop with regards to the actual market size, but again, fantastic opportunity if you're an operator or an investor. Regulatory reform, again, if the private sector is to be truly unleashed in this country, it really needs to be supported by a ministry that is capable of doing so and given all the tools it needs to do so. And finally, partnerships. This has been a theme from start to beginning in this session. Whether it's public-private partnerships, we're seeing a lot of interest in that, or engagement across private sectors and subsectors to deliver better solutions. These are some of the key learnings of perhaps what could be done for Indonesia to really realize its full potential. So I think that's my 20 minutes, Sachin. So please, back to you.
Thank you, Oliver. Very nicely put. I say you summarized some of the legal regulatory aspects quite nicely. I think there's a lot of gray area in this space about people not really understanding the details. And this is something that we would be very happy to guide people to ask consultancy in case they want more information. Thank you. So we'd like to just move on quickly because we're running a bit out of time. As you know, usually when we hold face-to-face roundtables at the Habibi Library, it's a 3-hour event. And because it's digital, we are trying to condense it into 2 hours because there's a lot of fatigue when you do digital events for longer than 2 hours. But we are essentially trying to cover as much ground that we normally do in 3 hours and 2 hours. Of course, minus the coffee breaks and the lovely snacks. So I'm going to ask Pak Gogot to please come in and give us an update on what's happened in the last 1 month. This is Pak Gogot's favorite part, and he does a really good job. So I'm looking forward to listening to you, Pak Gogot. Over to you, Pak.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Pak Sachin, Pak Jasper, Pak Oliver, and Pak Ami, Pak Director. Pak Soeb, of course, and Nalin has been very good in opening this discussion today. So I'd like just to give you 3 updates for this month. One is last week, I think, my minister just launched the national assessment. We call it AKM, Assessment Competency Minimal, as a replacement for UN, National Examination Standard. So it's been released and will be implemented in 2021 for grade 5, 8, and 11. So it's going to be a new thing. And of course, there will be a change, especially for the Bimbel, like a lot of students now taking extra hours studying outside, and it's going to be impacting the shadow education, because now it's actually parents spend more money for their children to pay the extra hours course, so they can get higher, higher rank in the school, so they can get a good school when they go up level, let's say from middle school to high school to college. And this is going to be impacted because this national exam assessment is not going to be whole at the end of the the stage. I mean, at the end of the schooling, let's say on the 9th grade of middle school, or the 12th grade of high school, or 6th grade of primary school. So it's going to be big difference actually. But now, of course, if you go to the different cities in Indonesia, the understanding of teachers, principal, and even district official, there will still be some of them, not have a clear understanding about this. But this is new. We still have time to prepare, and hopefully it will be going to be implemented very well in the 2021. And this one, and this first one, and second is we just released, the subsidy for internet data, to 37.5 million student, teachers, and college student, and also lecturer. So now it's improving, and we just did the survey. 85% of the recipient, they responded that they need this program to be continued in 2021. So this year we have allocated 7.1 trillions, trillions, 12 okay. 12, so many zero. No, 12, yes, 12 zeros, it's a lot, maybe more next year. And then the last one is just regarding about the spending of Indonesia in 2021, we will allocate it already in our budget. It's being approved by Parliament, 1.47 trillion also in 2021 on education technology. So this is being approved, and like 75% of them are going to be spent on infrastructure of education technology. So I think that's three things I like to update, and thank you very much. It's very, very good discussion today, and very heavy, I think. So thank you, Pak Jaspal, Oliver, Pak Ami, and back to you, Sachin. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pak Gogot. As usual, you're giving us some good insights on what's happening. This is a much watched sector, Pak. People are always looking at what the ministry is up to, what are the sectors doing, and the role of the ministry is extremely important. And we can see a lot of activity here. So thank you for that quick update. Actually, we're going to come to the close. I'm going to ask Shoaib, my co-founder at the Education Forum, to just give a short summary here, and also cover it in his next in his report, which he's the one who puts together a very good report. But before I do that, I'm just going to thank Pak Amish. Thank you very much, Pak Amish, for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to have you, and I think it's an important part of what you do is actually reaching out to the rest of the industry. I think we are able to do that by you being a part of this forum. We would love to welcome you at least once in 3 months if you could be having some kind of maybe a discussion or an update. Maybe not all the sessions will only be heavy on presentations. We can go into a discussion format where we can have about 10 or 12 people interacting on certain things, and we definitely want to invite you for that part. Thank you, Pa, and over to you, Shoaib.
Okay, thank you very much, Sachin. It's been a long session, but a very insightful session. I think this session really encapsulates what the Indonesia Education Forum and the Indonesia Economic Forum is all about. We bring different stakeholders together. And I think in this case, with Jaspal, with Oliver, with Pak Gogot, and of course, Pak Amish, we had all the major stakeholders in the education system coming together and discussing very clearly, very concisely, and thanks to Jaspal and Oliver, very honestly, some of the challenges that investors face, that operators face. I think we've been all of us have been here many years, maybe too long, but we've been here many years. And there's a saying that Indonesia is a land of potential, but for the longest time, it has always been the land of potential. What we need to really do now is to translate that potential into action and outcome. Really, I think the challenge in Indonesia, I think today has a real opportunity to leapfrog many other countries in terms of innovation, in terms of coming up with new regulatory frameworks, which are not incremental in nature, but really change the game. And this is really where I think the government with Pak Gogot and Pak Ananto and of course Pak Amish, they have a clear role to play in helping to really move Indonesia and the education sector forward in that sense. Yeah, I think regulation really is the key to not just education, but just about every sector that we look at, right? Over-regulation chokes the industry, drives away investment, and chokes businesses, right? Under-regulation leads to exploitation in many cases. So finding the right balance really is the key. And I'm glad that this segment and this session really looked at that in a very concise, full, and very deep manner. So thank you for everybody for joining this session. And I'll do my best to reflect all your views in the report. Thank you so much.
Yes. And Pa Amish will send you a copy of the report as well. And I'll send you also some of the copies of the previous report that we have done, Pa.
Okay.
We have also submitted a big report to Pa Mantri, I think in March or April, on the results of the Education Forum that we did last year. I'd love to share that with you, Pa. And thank you everybody for joining today. I'm sorry we didn't have much time for Q&A, but you can put in your questions if you have any in the chat box before you leave, because we'll take up this question and answer in the WhatsApp group that we have for the Education Forum. And if you're not already part of the WhatsApp group, please let Augie know about it. She's the one who gave you the code to join today, and she'll make sure that you're on the group. Updates will be posted there. That group is only for education issues and no spam. So I look forward to all of you being part of what we're doing in the next few months. Don't forget about November, around the 24th to the 27th is the Indonesia Education Forum. And the program will be released very soon by next week. There is one day with events and discussions on education. At the moment, it looks like it's on the 26th. And we have some very interesting discussions coming up there, and we enjoy having all of you a part of it. Thank you so much. And once again, have a great week. I know there's a long break coming up. So for those who are in Indonesia, there are, I think 4 or 5 days holiday. Jaspal, would you like to raise a hand?
No, I just say bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Right. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Guys,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you everyone.
Terima kasih Pak Amin.
Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Pak Jaspal.
Hati-hati Pak ya di mana-mana. Thank you.
Please put in your comments before you log off. Just any comments, the suggestions, or any questions. Just type it in the chat box before you leave, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pa Gogot, thank you, Pa, for inviting Pa Amish today. You always bring some great speakers. And this.
Actually, I have to say thank you very much, Pak Sachin, for giving me the opportunity.
Yes, Pa.
To join in this very wonderful forum.
Yes, Pa. Thank you, Pa. And Pa Amish, we will definitely keep in touch with you, Pa, for some of the other work that we are doing. Anything that you feel the Education Forum can do for you, let us know. We'd be very happy to even take up other topics, Pa. If Pa Amish would like to take on other topics that are related to helping, get a broader perspective or socialize some of the things you're doing, we'll be very happy to organize it, because we have a very diverse audience. Of course, in a roundtable, we only restrict the number of people. But if you're looking at a larger audience, we can get up to 300 people involved from stakeholders, people who are involved. We also do some events in Bahasa Indonesia, which would be more aimed at the communities here. So we do programs with the teachers. We have a community of teachers across all of Indonesia. We have we have a database of 150,000 teachers who have done digital programs, digital literacy programs. These are people who have done programs from Microsoft, Amazon, Intel, and many of these companies. We have access to all the databases. So we know which are the teachers who are ready for digital delivery or digital learning. From that entire population of, let's say, 5 million teachers, 150,000 or 200,000 are the low-hanging fruit. So there are a lot of things one can do with them. Maybe we can poll them, maybe we can do a survey with them, maybe you can run a program with them. We are ourselves doing a program for Kementerian Pa. Maybe Pa Amish doesn't know. We launched that Artificial Intelligence for Youth program with Pa Menteri Nadiem. That is our Orbit Future Academy that has done it. And it is working now with the GTK and the SMK Directorate to bring that program. At the moment, it is running in 20 schools as a pilot. Once it is successful, we will scale it up to 10,000 schools in Indonesia. We also will do it to the madrasas. So it will be available not only for MOEC public schools, but also the madrasas. And the goal is having 10,000 schools across Indonesia with the ability to learn artificial intelligence and do projects, artificial intelligence projects, because they will have an AI lab. Like you have physics lab, chemistry lab, there will be an AI lab. And those schools with an AI lab can be like support schools to the other schools in the area, because maybe not everyone can afford the equipment. So we are trying to design a system that will help the government make Indonesia into a nation full of AI trained youth, which we believe is going to be the key to the digital economy that is coming up in the next 10 years. So some of the work that we are doing, as not only as part of this, but also Orbit Education and a few other activities are very interesting. We'll love to share with you some other time, Parmish.
Okay.
Yes, Pak. Pak Gogot also, Pak, for the next one, Pak, we are doing for the November. I'll have a chat with you, Pak Gogot, about how we can design some of the sessions.
Okay, we'll be very happy to help.
Yes, Pak. Also, Pak Amish, we'd like to invite you again, Pak. So I will keep in touch with you for the next event, Pak.
Okay, will do. Thank
Yes,
you, Pak Sachin.
Thank you, Pak Amish.
Have a good week, Pak.
Okay.
Enjoy your holiday and stay safe. Wear a mask and stay safe, Pak.
Terima kasih. Masih Pak Soeb.
Thank you, Pak Gogot.
Yeah, see you
Yeah,
next time. Yeah, keep in touch.
Yes, Pak.